Welcome back, everyone. In this video tutorial, we're going to cover how to set up a MySQL database, and eventually then we'll use that to deploy WordPress in the next video tutorial after that. This is very similar to the MySQL database and DNN installation video tutorials that we did earlier. You may have already seen those. We're just going to be working with MySQL, and WordPress will be the example application we use for these couple of videos. It's actually really straightforward. It's a very simple process and pretty similar to working with MySQL and other applications. So if you're familiar with those types of databases or applications, you'll feel right at home. This just uses a different program and a slightly different interface, but really the process is actually very similar. You will need to be logged into your server on the Windows desktop here. I just want to point out real quick that the server may not have MySQL server by default. A lot of times when we deploy these, that's not required by the customer. If they're working with Windows applications or .NET New, they probably don't really have the use for the MySQL server. So it may not be installed initially. If it's not, just feel free to contact our staff, or if you're unsure, feel free to contact our staff. We can definitely let you know if it is already installed and give you the connection information for it. Or if it's not installed, we'll have one of our staff go ahead and install it for you for free. And certainly you could install it yourself using the newest version of MySQL Server downloaded from their website, but that's not necessary. If you're uncomfortable with that, just contact our staff and we'll be happy to do it for you. So let's just get started. It's actually a very simple process. You just want to left click on your start menu, choose the down arrow here to get a list of all your applications, go up to your search box in the top right corner and type MySQL, and you will see all the MySQL stuff come up. This is the actual MySQL server. You don't need that. What you want is the MySQL Workbench. 6.0 is just the current version. And basically, this is like SQL Server Management Studio that we worked with in our other video tutorials for MySQL databases. So this is actually the management studio that's going to allow you to connect to MySQL Server and create databases, users, manage them, restore backups, all of that good stuff. This will be installed automatically by our staff along with your MySQL server. So if you have one, you should have the other. If you don't see either, then it's most likely not yet installed. Just contact our staff and we'll get you all set up. So just left click on it and that'll open up the application here on our desktop. This is what it looks like when you get into it. Typically when we install this, we're going to set up your local root connection for you. The root user is the system administrator equivalent for MySQL. Instead of SA, they use root is the name of their highest level administrator user. So typically we'll have this connection already set up for you, and you would just left click on it to initiate that connection. Otherwise, if this isn't here, or if you ever need to set up new connections, you can use this little plus symbol right here, and that will pop up a new connection dialog box where you can type in your, if you have a new user that you've set up, maybe you want to connect directly to one database, or maybe this isn't here and you're just trying to set it up yourself. You would give it a connection name at the top, whatever you want to call it. Host name, this is actually local, so this would work fine, or you can type in the words localhost instead. Leave the port at 3306. Username, you can see it already filled in the word root. That is the system administrator level. Default schema would be if you wanted to tie this user directly to a database. That way that you could just log straight into that database instead of directly to the server. And then here, the password option, you can click this button here to type in your password and hit OK, and that will actually store it directly in the vault. And we'll just do a little test setup here real quick. Call this username test. Password we'll say is... Actually, we'll leave the password blank so you can see what that looks like. If you leave the password unfilled in and you hit OK, see it adds your new connection box right here. When you connect to it by left-clicking on it, it'll make you type in the password at this point, and then you can choose to save it in the vault. So we'll just type in and hit save. And it's going to give us an error. See, it tells you can't because I just made up some information there. I just wanted to show you how that works in case you need to add more users. You can right-click on it and choose Delete Connection. And here we are. So we got our connection already set up, and you just left click on it one time, and that will use the connection information saved there to actually open an instance on your MySQL server. To create the database, it's actually very simple. You just go up to the top here of these little picture icons. You just want to left click on this one right here. It looks like a little stack with a plus symbol on it. And if you mouse over it long enough, the tooltip should pop up and will tell you that you can see right there, create a new schema in the connected server. That's the option you want. Databases in MySQL are called schemas. schemas. So maybe a little confusing new lingo for you, but that's what you're looking for. So just left click that once, and that'll pop up the new schema box. And at this point, it's probably a good idea to just go ahead and open your notepad. Go to the applications, notepad. And just like we did with MySQL, we're going to record this database information because you'll need to reference it a few times, and it's just much easier if you have this information typed on the side here. So I'm going to be working with ihostdnn.net is the name of my website, just like we used as an example in our other videos. So I'm going to call the database ihostdnn. We're going to need a username, and we're going to need a password. So let's go ahead and just create those now. We'll just call the username ihostdnn. And like I pointed out in our other videos, I always recommend to make your database name and your username similar to your actual domain name or host name of your website. That way, it's very easy to keep track of which databases and which users belong to which websites. You don't just have a hodgepodge of stuff in your server that you don't really know is related to which websites. Password, I always create random stuff, so we'll just type in a mix of lowercase letters and capital letters. Then we'll throw in a symbol and some numbers. Okay, so there we go. That's a nice strong password. It uses lowercase, uppercase, symbol, and some numbers. I'll just go ahead and copy that so that we have it here. All right, we decided our database name is going to be ihostdnn. So on your new schema box here that popped up when you left click on this, all you have to do is go to the name line and type in the name of your new database, which we're going to call it ihostdnn. You can just leave the coalition at server default, come down and hit apply. This little box will pop up, which is pretty cool because it actually shows you the code. This is what the server is actually going to do on the back end. It's going to create a schema for you, and it's going to call it ihostdnn. This is neat because it actually kind of teaches you the code when you go along doing this stuff. The rest of this is actually just a graphical interface, and when you choose these options, the server interprets it into raw code and then actually runs this as a query on the database server and does what it's supposed to. In this case, create a database named ihostdnn. So it's cool that it kind of teaches you the code. MySQL server doesn't do that. It just, when you click go, it just does everything for you. So you could actually copy this code and save it later, and you would actually have code that you could launch as a query and kind of teaches you as you go. Just hit apply at the bottom here. It'll tell you that it executed your SQL statements, everything was successful, and you just hit finish. Now your database will be listed in the box of schemas here on the far left, and you can see it right here. So now the only thing that we need to do is add our user to it with the proper permission, which is actually very simple. You just come up here to the management, left click on users and privileges option. That'll bring up your users and privileges tab, and you can see all of the current users on the server listed right here in this column. Go down to the bottom of this column, you'll find the add account button. Just click that once, and that'll open up the add account options right here. So you go to your login name, you can see it just puts a new user by default. You don't want to use that. We're going to go with the one that we had created a moment ago. We decided our username is going to be ihostdnn, so we'll just copy and paste that. And then the password we're also going to need right now, so we'll just go ahead and copy that and paste it into the appropriate boxes. And again, this is why I use the notepad, because this is random. It's kind of hard to remember. If I actually had to type this in by hand in both of these boxes, I might mess it up or I might not remember it. This way it's just typed in one location. I can just copy and paste it wherever I may need it during this setup. And then this box right here is very important. Limit connectivity to host matching. By default, it puts in this %, which is actually a wildcard that means it would accept connections from anywhere, meaning even remote connections from outside of your server, which is not recommended for security reasons. So what you want to do is actually just type in the word localhost here, and that'll limit connections with this particular user that you're creating to within the server itself, meaning you would have to be logged into the server on the desktop like we are now, or the application that's going to use this username would have to actually be running locally on the server, which it will be. So this is ideal, really. Nobody outside of your server or any connections outside of your server would be allowed to get into your database from anywhere except local. So that's very important, and you always want to have that local host. All right, so now flip over to the account limits tab. Nothing to do here, just skip it. Administrative roles, again, nothing to do here. The reason there's nothing to do here is because you do not want to grant any type of server administrative access to this user. This user is very specifically being created for your website, and the database will be associated with that website. So there's no reason for this user to have any type of administrative access to your server. If you need administrative access, that's what you use your root user for. So flip over past that tab, just go to the schema privileges. This is where we'll actually associate the user to the MySQL database that we set up called iHostDNN. You can see in the box here it's blank so far because it's not tied with any direct databases. So just click the Add Entry option. That'll bring up the new schema privilege window. You don't want any schema because that would allow it to give access to any database. You would actually be able to log into any database using this username. That's not recommended for security reasons. You're not using patterns or names here. This is with the wildcards. So again, skip over that. And then down here, you want to choose selected schema. You'll get a list of all your schemas or databases. Choose the one that we've just created and hit OK. That will add the database into. You could technically add multiple databases in here, but again, not recommended for security reasons. I usually want to do a 1-to-1 ratio, one username per database per website. So here you see that we have our schemas now associated. Privileges none. Just come down here. These are all the privilege options right here in these checkboxes. You actually just want to click the select all option right here in the bottom right, and you can see that will fill in all of the appropriate checkbox privileges for you automatically. You do not need this grant option. That one should be unchecked when you hit select all. That's the only one it does not fill in, and there is absolutely no reason to need that. So just hit select all once. It'll fill in all your checkboxes, and then hit apply. And that is literally all there is to it. You can now see that the schema is associated with the user, and it has all the appropriate privileges. You are actually completely done. You have now created your database, your user, and gave the user the correct permission. That is all there is to it. So you can close your tabs up here, and then you can actually close your connection by hitting this X right here. And then you can even close the actual program because we are all done with it at this point. So that is all there is to it, and we still have all of our database connection information right here, which we will need when we go to deploy our application in the next video tutorial. So we thank everybody for joining us, and we hope that this information was useful to set up your MySQL databases, and we'll see you guys next time. We're going to go ahead and get this WordPress installation deployed using this setup and information. See you then. Take care, guys.